Story: The Swallows Return.
The rain beat against the window pane with a rhythmic, almost hypnotic insistence, sounding like 1,000 tiny fingers tapping a code I couldn't quite decipher. It was one of those October evenings where the twilight lingers, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and charcoal gray. I sat in my workshop, the smell of beeswax, turpentine, and old mahogany wrapping around me like a familiar blanket. My name is Genevieve. I am a restorer of antiques, a doctor from memories, as my grandmother used to say. I spend my days breathing life into things that others have discarded, fixing broken legs on Chippendale chairs, polishing the tarnish off Victorian silverware, and stitching together the fraying tapestries of lives long forgotten. But lately, it felt as though the only thing I couldn't fix was the gaping hollow in my own chest. It started on a Tuesday. I remember the day clearly because Tuesdays are usually when the universe decides to test my patience. I was in a dusty thrift store on the outskirts of the city, hunting for vintage brass handles for a dresser I was restoring. The shop was a chaotic labyrinth of discarded items, piles of old magazines, lamps with cracked shades, and porcelain dolls that stared at you with unblinking, glassy eyes. I was about to leave, empty-handed and frustrated, when I felt a sudden, inexplicable pull toward a cardboard box shoved under a table of mismatched shoes. It wasn't a logical decision. It was a physical sensation, a tightening in my solar plexus, like a hook had snagged my soul and was reeling me in. I knelt, ignoring the creak of my knees and the dust that immediately coated my skirt. I rummaged through the box, tangled cables, broken kitchen timers, a single knitted glove. And then, my fingers brushed against something soft, velvet. I pulled it out. It was a small navy blue velvet pouch, the kind used for jewelry, worn bald in spots from years of handling. My heart did a strange fluttering somersault. I had owned a pouch exactly like this 20 years ago. With trembling hands, I loosened the drawstring. Inside lay a silver locket. It was tarnished, almost black with oxidation, but the shape was unmistakable, an oval with a tiny, etched swallow on the front. The air left my lungs. "It can't be," I whispered, my voice sounding foreign in the quiet shop. I rubbed my thumb over the bird. Decades ago, on a pier in Santa Monica, a young man named Julian had given me a locket just like this. He was an artist, a dreamer with paint permanently stained under his fingernails and eyes the color of a stormy sea. He called me his swallow because he said I was always looking for a place to build a nest, but I was too afraid to land. We were young, foolishly in love, and convinced that time was an infinite resource. But then, life happened. Or rather, my mother happened. She was a woman of iron will and cold calculation, who believed an artist was no match for a girl from a good family. There were arguments, manipulated truths, and finally, a sudden, unexplained disappearance. Julian vanished one misty morning, leaving behind an empty apartment and a note that simply said, "Fly, Genevieve, I won't clip your wings." I had thrown that locket into the ocean in a fit of grief and rage a week after he left. I watched it sink beneath the foamy waves, taking my heart with it. So how in the name of all that is holy was it sitting in my hand in a thrift store 3,000 miles away from that pier 20 years later? I bought it for 50 cents. The cashier, a bored teenager named Hazel, according to her badge, popped her gum and didn't even look up from her phone. She had no idea she was selling me a ghost. I drove home in a daze. The rain had started then, a light drizzle turning into the downpour that was currently battering my workshop windows. I placed the locket on my workbench under the magnifying lamp. I needed to prove to myself that this was a coincidence, a mass-produced piece of jewelry from the 90s, There must have been thousands of them made. I took a soft cloth and some silver polish. Slowly, methodically, I began to clean it. The black tarnish gave way to the gleaming metal beneath. The swallow emerged, bright and silver. I pried the locket open. It was empty. Of course it was. But then the light caught something on the inside of the casing. A scratch? No, an engraving. I lowered the magnifying glass, squinting until my eyes watered. There, scratched crudely into the soft silver with the tip of a needle or a knife, were numbers. 41.23, 72.56. Coordinates? I sat back, the leather of my stool creaking. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together in my lap. This wasn't just a coincidence. This was a message. But from whom? And why now? The phone rang, shattering the silence and making me jump nearly a foot in the air. I pressed a hand to my racing heart and answered. "Genevieve, you're not answering your cell," the voice on the other end scolded. It was Octavia, my best friend and the most pragmatic woman I knew. Octavia didn't believe in ghosts, fate, or anything she couldn't put in a spreadsheet. I was working, I lied, my voice trembling. "You sound odd," Octavia noted immediately. She had a radar for my moods. "What's wrong? Did you inhale too much varnish again?" "Octavia, something happened. I found something." I explained the locket, the thrift store, the sensation of being pulled, and the numbers. I waited for her logical dismissal. I needed it. I needed her to tell me I was being a sentimental fool undergoing a midlife crisis. There was a long silence on the line. "Genevieve," she said softly, her tone unusually serious. "You threw your locket in the ocean. You told me that story 100 times. Unless a fish swallowed it, swam to a different ocean, was caught, and the locket was extracted and sold to a thrift shop, this is impossible." "I know it's impossible. That's why I'm terrified," I whispered. "What do the numbers mean?" "They look like coordinates," Octavia said, the clicking of a keyboard audible in the background. She was already searching. Latitude and longitude. 41.23, negative 72.56. Let's see. "Genevieve, are you sitting down?" "Yes, tell me." "It's a location in Connecticut, a small town called Stony Creek, near the Thimble Islands." "Connecticut?" I frowned. "I've never been there. Julian was from Oregon. We lived in California. Why Connecticut?" "Maybe it's not about the past," Octavia suggested, her voice dropping to a hush. "Maybe it's about where you need to go." I hung up the phone with a sense of vertigo. Stony Creek. The name meant nothing to me. That night, I couldn't sleep. The locket sat on my nightstand, mocking me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Julian's face, the way his hair fell over his forehead, the smell of turpentine and cedar wood that always clung to his clothes, the way he used to hum Claire de Lune when he was concentrating, always skipping the same note in the middle. The next morning, the bell above my shop door chimed. I looked up from my coffee, expecting a dinghy or a browsing tourist. Instead, a man stood there. He was tall, wearing a long charcoal wool coat that looked expensive, but dated, like something from the 1940s. He held a wet umbrella in one hand and a wrapped parcel in the other. He had silver hair swept back from a high forehead and eyes that were startlingly kind. "Good morning," he said. His voice was deep, resonant like a cello. "Are you Genevieve?" "I am," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. "How can I help you?" "My name is Silas," he said. "I was told you are the best restorer in the city. I have something delicate." He placed the parcel on the counter and began to unwrap it. The paper was brown and thick, tied with twine. As he peeled back the layers, a strange scent filled the room. Lavender and sea salt? He revealed a wooden box. It was a music box, clearly very old. The wood was dark, perhaps walnut, inlaid with mother of pearl forming a constellation of stars on the lid. But it was damaged. The wood was warped, as if it had been exposed to water, and the hinges were rusted shut. "I need this opened," Silas said, looking at me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "And the mechanism fixed. It hasn't played its song in 20 years. 20 years. The timeline again. "I can take a look," I said, reaching out to touch the box. As my fingers grazed the wood, a shock of static electricity zapped me, sharp and stinging. I pulled my hand back. Silas didn't blink. "It has a lot of energy stored inside, waiting to be released." "Where did you get this?" I asked, examining the warping. "It looks like it's been underwater." "It was salvaged," Silas said cryptically. "Can you fix it?" "I can try, but water damage is tricky. The cylinder might be corroded, the comb might have missing teeth." "I have faith in you, Genevieve," he said. He didn't ask for a price. He didn't ask for a timeline. He simply turned to leave. "Wait," I called out. "I need your contact information in case I have questions." He paused at the door, the gray light of the rainy street framing his silhouette. "I will come back in 3 days. That is all the time you will need." And then he was gone. I stood there, staring at the door. 3 days? It would take me weeks to properly restore a piece like this. I carried the box to my workbench. I felt drawn to it, just like I had been drawn to the locket. I clamped it gently and began the arduous process of removing the rust from the hinges. I worked for hours, losing track of time. I forgot to eat lunch. I forgot to turn on the radio. It was just me and the box. By late afternoon, I managed to pry the lid open. The inside was lined with rotted silk, which I carefully removed. The mechanism was indeed corroded, a lump of rust and grime. But as I cleaned it with specialized solvents, brushing away the decay of decades, the brass cylinder began to shine. I worked into the night. The rain continued to pour, a relentless backdrop to my obsession. Around midnight, I finally got the winding key to turn. It was stiff, protesting with a groan of metal on metal. I gave it 1 turn, 2, 3. I let go. The cylinder began to rotate. The metal teeth of the comb plucked the pins on the cylinder. The sound was tinny, faint, but distinct. Claire de Lune. I smiled sadly. It was a common song for music boxes, a classic. But then, it happened. The melody flowed, familiar and sweet, and then it skipped a note. My heart stopped. I listened closer. The mechanism whirred, played the next phrase, and skipped that same specific note again. This wasn't a mechanical error. The pin for that note wasn't broken. It was deliberately missing. I grabbed my magnifying glass. I looked at the cylinder. Where the pin for that specific note should have been, the brass was smooth. It had never been there. Whoever made this music box had intentionally programmed it to play the song wrong, to play it exactly the way Julian used to hum it. I backed away from the table, my hand covering my mouth. "This isn't possible," I said aloud. "Julian is gone. He's been gone for 20 years. But the coincidences were piling up like bricks, building a wall around me that I couldn't escape. The locket, the coordinates, the music box, the skipped note. I looked at the box again. With the mechanism now clean, I noticed something else. Underneath the cylinder, there was a false bottom, a tiny seam in the wood that I had missed before. I grabbed a thin probe tool and gently pressed into the seam. With a soft click, a secret compartment popped open. Inside was not a jewel nor a treasure. It was a photograph. A Polaroid, faded with age, the edges curling. I picked it up with tweezers. It was a picture of me, but not a picture I had ever posed for. It was me 20 years ago, sitting on a bench in the park, reading a book. I was wearing a red coat I had loved and lost, and in the background, blurry but recognizable, was a street sign, Stony Creek Road. I dropped the tweezers. The photo fluttered to the desk. I had never been to Stony Creek, yet here was a photo of me, apparently there, 20 years ago. My mind was reeling. Hallucinations? Was I losing my grip on reality? I paced the workshop floor. Was Silas a ghost? Was he Julian in disguise? No, Julian would be my age, 45. Silas was in his 60s at least. I grabbed my phone and dialed Octavia again. It was 1 a.m. "Genevieve, if you are not dying, I am going to kill you," she groaned, her voice thick with sleep. "I need to go to Connecticut," I said, my voice steady for the first time in days. "What? Why?" "Because the music box has a picture of me in a place I've never been, and it plays Julian's version of Claire de Lune." "And the coordinates you found match the street sign in the photo?" Octavia was silent for a long moment. Then, the sound of bedsheets rustling. "I'm coming with you." "No, this is something I have to do alone." "Genevieve, I have to, Octavia. It's a pilgrimage. I feel it in my bones. If I don't go, I will never know the truth. I will spend the rest of my life wondering." "Okay," she sighed, "but you keep your location on, and you text me every hour. If you miss a check-in, I'm calling the police and the National Guard." "Deal." The drive the next morning was surreal. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the world washed clean and glistening. As I drove north, leaving the city behind, the landscape changed. The concrete gave way to rolling hills, fiery with autumn foliage. Reds, oranges, and golds burned against the pale blue sky. I entered the coordinates into my GPS. It led me off the highway, onto winding country roads, and finally to the coast. The smell of the ocean hit me through the open window. Salt, seaweed, and cold air. It smelled like memory. I arrived in Stony Creek around noon. It was a picturesque village, with houses perched on granite rocks overlooking the sound. The Thimble Islands were scattered in the distance like stepping stones for giants. My GPS announced, "You have arrived." I was parked in front of a large, weathered Victorian house. It had a wraparound porch and a tower that looked out to sea. The paint was peeling slightly, a soft shade of seafoam green. The garden was wild, overgrown with hydrangeas that had turned rusty pink in the autumn chill. I sat in the car for a long time. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles were white. I thought, I'm going to knock on a stranger's door because of a locket and a music box? But I couldn't turn back. The pull was magnetic. I got out of the car. The gravel crunched loudly under my boots. I walked up the path, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I climbed the porch steps. There was a brass knocker in the shape of a lion's head. I lifted it and let it fall. The sound echoed through the house. Silence. I waited. I was about to turn away, relief washing over me, when the door creaked open. A woman stood there. She was tall, elegant, with silver hair tied back in a severe bun. She wore a long cardigan and held a cup of tea. She looked at me, and her eyes widened. She dropped the cup. It shattered on the porch floor, splashing hot tea everywhere, but she didn't seem to notice. "You came," she whispered. "He said you would come." I stared at her. "Who are you? Who said I would come?" "I am Vanessa," she said, her voice shaking. "Julian's sister." The ground seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "Julian? Julian is here?" Vanessa looked at me with a mixture of pity and awe. "Come in, Genevieve. We have been waiting for you for a very long time." I stepped into the house. It smelled of oil paint, turpentine, and old wood, the exact scent of my memories, amplified. The hallway was lined with paintings, dozens of them, landscapes, abstracts, portraits. As I walked down the hall, I realized something terrifying. They were all paintings of me. Me sleeping, me laughing, me looking out a window, me crying, me at different ages Julian had never seen. Me with short hair, me with long hair, me in the red coat from the photo. How? I gasped, touching a canvas where I looked about 30. How did he paint this? He hasn't seen me in 20 years. He sees you, Vanessa said softly behind me. He has always seen you. In his dreams. He calls them his visions. He says you are connected by a silver thread that can never be cut. She led me into a large sunroom at the back of the house. The light poured in, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. In the center of the room, sitting in a wheelchair facing the window that looked out onto the sea, was a man. He was thin, his hair completely white now, but the set of his shoulders was familiar. He wore a thick sweater. His hands rested on a blanket on his lap. "Julian?" I choked out. He didn't turn. He didn't move. "He can't hear you very well," Vanessa said gently, "and he can't see you. He lost his sight 5 years ago. Diabetes. It took his eyes and then his legs." A sob ripped from my throat. My beautiful, vibrant Julian. I walked toward him slowly. My legs felt like lead. I knelt beside his chair. "Julian?" I said, louder this time. I reached out and took his hand. His skin was paper thin, cold. At the touch, he flinched. His head turned toward me. His eyes were milky, unfocused, staring at something beyond me. "Genevieve?" he rasped. His voice was a shadow of the cello-like tone I remembered. "I'm here," I wept. "I'm here, Julian." He lifted a trembling hand to my face. His fingers traced my jawline, my nose, my lips. He was reading me like Braille. "You found the locket?" he whispered. "I knew the universe would return it to you. I prayed to every star." "I found it," I said, tears streaming down my face onto his fingers. "And the music box." "But Julian, why? Why did you leave? Why didn't you fight for us?" He let out a sigh that sounded like the wind in the eaves. "Your mother," he said. "She came to me. She told me you were pregnant by another man, a man with a future. She said if I stayed, I would ruin your life. She offered me money to leave, to let you have your happiness." "I wasn't pregnant," I cried, fury mixing with the grief. She lied to both of us." "I didn't take the money," Julian said, a faint smile touching his lips. "But I left. I thought I was saving you. I came here, to my aunt's old house. I painted you every day so I wouldn't die of loneliness." "And the photo?" I asked. "The photo in the music box?" "I photoshopped it," Vanessa interjected softly from the doorway. "Years ago. He wanted to see what you would look like sitting in our garden. He begged me to make it real for him. He put it in the box as a talisman." "And Silas?" I asked, turning to Vanessa. "The man in the gray coat?" Vanessa frowned. "Who is Silas?" "The man who brought me the music box. Tall, silver hair, gray wool coat." Vanessa's face went pale. She walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up a framed photograph. She handed it to me. It was a black and white photo of a man in a 1940s style coat. "This is our Uncle Silas," she said. "He built this house. He died in 1985, Genevieve." A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the drafty house. I looked at the photo. It was him, the same kind eyes, the same coat. "He died before I was born," I whispered. "He was a watchmaker," Julian murmured, his thumb stroking my hand. "He made the music box for his wife. He always said that true love can bend the laws of physics. That time is not a straight line, but a circle." I looked around the room, the paintings of me, the locket that traveled across the country, the dead uncle who delivered a message, the song with the missing note. It wasn't just coincidences, it was a conspiracy of the universe, a tapestry woven by something far greater than us, pulling the threads tight to bring two broken souls back together before the end. "I wasted so much time," I sobbed, burying my face in Julian's blanket. 20 years, Julian. We lost 20 years. "No," Julian said firmly. He gripped my hand with surprising strength. "We didn't lose them. We lived them so we could understand the value of this moment. If we had stayed together then, maybe we would have destroyed each other. We were too young, too fiery. Now we are just ashes and embers, but embers keep each other warm the longest." I looked up at him. He was blind, broken, and dying, but he was the love of my life. "I'm not leaving," I said. "I'm staying here. I can restore this house. I can take care of you." "It's a lot to ask," Vanessa said, wiping her eyes. "I'm not asking," I said. "I'm telling. I'm done fighting fate." I stayed. The next few months were the hardest and most beautiful of my life. I moved my workshop to the sunroom. I restored the house while Julian sat nearby, listening to the sounds of my tools, the sanding, the polishing. I described every color to him. I described the sunset over the Thimble Islands. We talked for hours. We filled in the gaps of 20 years. We laughed, we cried, we sat in comfortable silence. One evening, about 6 months after I arrived, Julian asked me to play the music box. I wound it up. The melody of Claire de Lune filled the room with that heartbreaking skipped note. "It's perfect," Julian whispered. "Imperfection is what makes it real." He reached out for my hand. "Genevieve, my swallow, you came home." "I did," I said, kissing his forehead. He passed away that night in his sleep, holding my hand. The grief was different this time. It wasn't the sharp, jagged agony of abandonment. It was a soft, melancholic ache, a sense of completion. He hadn't left me, he had waited for me, and we had had our time, however brief. After the funeral, I was cleaning out the attic when I found an old journal of Uncle Silas's. It was filled with sketches of clock mechanisms and philosophical ramblings about time. On the last page, there was an entry dated 2 days before he died in 1985. "I had a dream tonight, a vision of the future. I saw a woman with hair like spun gold restoring my old music box. She looked sad. I feel a duty to help her. If the spirit lingers, I will be the messenger. Love must find its way home." I closed the book, tears pricking my eyes. I looked out the window at the ocean, churning and gray. I wasn't alone. I never had been. I still live in the house in Stony Creek. I still restore antiques. But now, when I find a hidden compartment or a secret message in an old desk, I don't dismiss it. I listen. I look for the signs. Because the universe is talking to us, constantly. In the flight of a bird, in a song on the radio, in the coincidences that aren't coincidences at all. We just have to be brave enough to stop, look, and believe. My name is Genevieve, and this was my story. It's a story about lost time, found love, and the mystical threads that bind us all. If you have ever felt a sign, a déjà vu, or a coincidence that made you shiver, don't ignore it. It might be your destiny knocking on the door. Please subscribe to the channel if this story touched your heart. Share it with someone you love. You never know, it might be the sign they were looking for. And tell me in the comments, have you ever experienced a mystical coincidence that changed your life? I read every single one. Until next time, keep your eyes open. The magic is real.